Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very glad to see you all here. And before I go any further, I would like to say that I agree with every word that Gail just said. I would tell you in different language. My language is a little less professional, a little less educated than Gail's, but she covered all the bases, and it's all great stuff. You need to learn to watch your horses anywhere from miniatures to the draft horses that I'm going to talk about. The signs, the symptoms, the indications are all the same. Anyway, as I was just introduced, my name is Marion Young, and I am a third-generation Clydesdale person. It's what I have dealt with most of my life. I have dealt with the other major draft horse breeds, but predominantly Clydesdales. And many of you here today are going to look around and go, well, who wants those big clumpers around? You know, they're hard on the furniture. Somebody does, that's good. They're hard on the furniture, they're hard on the stuff in the barn, they eat more, they poke more, they just take more space, no, the whole 9 yards. But there's a lot of good things to be said about them too. And in today's day and age, there are many different aspects that the draft horses are used. From my point of view, I would tell you first off, show horses, you know, the big hitch horses, the 6-horse hitches, the 8-horse hitches. That's very close to my heart. But there's a whole new market has opened up in pleasure horses, in riding horses. The big thing being the draft horses in general, particularly the Clydesdales, have a very, very puppy dog type attitude as opposed to some of your smaller, more athletic breeds. People talk of them being husband-safe horses. You know, that's not really very fair if you get right down to it, but it seems in the world we live in, there are a lot of females that are equestrians, and they have a hopefully loving partner that puts up with this, and they decide they need a horse that their partner can ride once in a while. Well, for the most part, a Clydesdale particularly, you get a mare, gelding, a little bit of maturity. You know, they'll go out, you go once every 3 weeks or once a month, you put a saddle on and they'll follow along. They won't cause you a lot of grief. They're described as more woe than go. You know, if you buy your partner who's a less experienced equestrian a thoroughbred off the track, maybe you don't just care for them quite as much as they care for you. Let's put it that way, because you might be in for a lot of hospital visits. But anyway, back to these show horses of today. First off, I can tell you a lot of them cost huge amounts of money. Now, huge amounts of money vary in everybody's pocketbook, you know. Some people think $1,000 is a huge amount of money. Some people think $100,000 is a lot of money. And we've all got spectrum somewhere in between. But the draft horses have, the top-end show horses have greatly increased in price. If you want to go out and decide, you win the lottery and you decide your dream is to have a championship 6-horse hitch, it's going to take a fair bit of your lottery winnings to get it accomplished. And the horses are probably the cheap end of it. And even if you buy expensive horses, they're still probably the cheap end of the whole project, because you need at least one, if not two, 53-foot horse vans to take one of these rigs on the road. You need a wagon that, yes, you could buy one for under $10,000, but if you're going to go all across the countryside, you're probably going to want one that's going to cost you $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 to be at the top of the game. The same goes for your harness, the amount of help that you need. If you're going to take a 6-horse hitch on the road, and some of these outfits are on the road pretty well year-round now. There are a few going on in Pennsylvania right now at the Pennsylvania Farm Show. The top-end competitors are gearing up to head to Loveland, Colorado, followed by Denver, and the circuit goes all the way around, and they'll finish their year out at the Royal Winter Fair in November. So they have very, very little downtime, and there are full-time professional people caring for these horses all the time, and extra help that go on the road with them. So your labor bill is huge. You need wagons, harness, You need stall decorations and curtains, another huge expense. Trucks, trailers, campers, either motel rooms or camper vans, whatever. It's a huge, huge project. For most of us, it's out of reach. Even if you win the lottery, you're not going to do it. You can buy yourself a nice show horse for a whole lot less money, and a set of harness and a cart, and have a lot of fun at a more local level. It doesn't have to be out of reach for everybody. So, for those of you that have an interest in these things, it can be a lot more affordable. But if you want to be at the top end of the business, if you think you're going to go and win the World Clydesdale Show, which is coming up in 2018, or the World Percheron Show that's coming up in 2018, you've got a lot of money to spend before you get there. And you need to gain a lot of experience, and you need to hire a lot of very, very well-qualified help. I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. In 2003, we had mad cow in Canada. I'm sure some of you, most of you remember what it did to our agricultural economy. Everything was doom and gloom. The American economy wasn't great at the same time. And a horse exhibitor asked me to come to Harrisburg to help him show. In this case, it was Shire horses. And I said, sure, I can do that. I always say sure. And off I went. There was 47 six-horse hitches entered at that show that year of all the different breeds. I can't give you a breakdown on it, but there was 47 entered. I had just come from home, and everything in the news was doom and gloom, terrible economy, farmers, terrible, terrible, terrible. 47 six-horse hitches. You couldn't have believed the trucks, the trailers. And a lot of these outfits don't go cheap. I mean, chrome stacks, chrome, fancy, high-end graphics on the sides of the vans. It's not just any old furniture van banger that you can get along with. I mean, a lot of these outfits spend more money decorating their horse van than you would do remodeling your house. So, I'm going, wow, and the economy's bad? What would this place be like if the economy was good? It is a hobby for a lot of people that have a lot of disposable income if you're going to play at that end. On the other hand, as I say, you can have a nice horse to show and halter, or to ride, or to drive single in a cart, or a team, and it doesn't have to be nearly that expensive. The next thing that comes to my mind when talking about draft horses today is that the breeds themselves have changed hugely from what they were even, let's say, 35, 40 years ago, and even more, from the 40 years before that. Anybody in the audience have any idea what I'm talking about? You do, tell me.
Well, when I bought my draft, I was recommended to buy an older breed or older bloodline, because the newer bloodlines they're breeding for more showiness, a little bit more hot in the show ring. They're more elevated, not the body draft you pull a plow. I have a Belgian, and she's more the older stock, so she doesn't have that energy level that the newer breed. I don't know if there's any truth to that.
There's quite a lot of truth to what you're saying, and you're right along the lines of what I was going to say. The Belgians, the Percherons, the Clydesdales, and the Shires being the four most common breeds of draft horses in North America. There are other breeds, but those are the most common. And originally, if you go way back, they were about 16.1 to 16.3 hands high, stout built, well-sprung ribs, shorter, thick neck, big feet. Plod, plod, plod. Now, everybody's looking for a horse. Somebody calls you up and they're looking for a draft horse. Their very first question is, what size is it? If your answer for a mature horse is anything less than 18 hands, they're probably going to hang up on you. They want them 18 hands plus. Well, you take a horse that was intended to be about 16.2 roughly, and now you want it 18.2, that's a huge change. they've become much longer necked. They've bred them to be that way. They want a much longer, elegant neck, good slope of shoulder, so their head sits up, so that when they look through this big Scotch collar that they wear, it doesn't look like the collar's parked behind their ears. It looks like it's sitting on their shoulder, and they've got some head and neck, nice set of ears, presence. That's the first thing they want. They then want this 18 hands, 18-2 instead of 16-2, 16-3, and they want a much cleaner leg, meaning cleaner bone, less hair, easier kept. Yes, somebody's making a face back there. Even the Clydesdales, they don't want the amounts of hair that we used to have. They want just enough hair to call them a Clydesdale, because when you get lots of hair, it gets to be a lot more work. The more hair, the more work. So the modern trend is to have just enough hair that you can distinguish the breed as a Clydesdale. They don't want lots. The more you have, the more grooming, the more prepping. You probably have to bandage to set the hair in place to accentuate the joints. If you've just got enough, it cuts out a lot of that work. Easier to wash, easier to get dried, easier to present. So there's some of the things that have changed. They also, with this lesser amount of bone, longer legs, less bone, our draft horses, many of them today, the very, very good show horses, and I happened to see a picture, good old social media, I happened to see a picture last night of the Supreme Champion horse in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania yesterday, happened to be a Belgian gelding. Beautiful looking horse. But he didn't appear to me in that picture to have very much bone than a large saddle horse. Big horse, I'm sure he was well over 18 hands, beautiful head and neck, beautiful top line, but his legs were not much bigger than a saddle horse. And yes, he appeared to have great big feet, but how much of those feet were real feet? Because today, our blacksmiths have become very, very professional. You've got less bone, you've got less width of heel. The two things go together. If you've got no heel, you've got no natural foot. Draft horses are supposed to have white heels, big feet, broad bone, something that balances with their body. At the moment we're getting horses with great big huge bodies, and now they're starting to move around on toothpicks. And the way the industry has gone in the show horse world, they're looking for less bone, big feet, which are mostly fake, shoes, pads, extremely exaggerated. They would like to have big feet, but they just can't get them with this lesser bone. And the whole thing all interacts, it's how it works. But with all of that, you get a horse that they want more head set, more action. That's the next question in the line. How big is the horse? What color is it? How does it move? Is question number 3 if they're calling to ask you about a horse. Now, if somebody called you 30 years ago and asked you how the horse moved, they wanted to know if it picked its feet up straight in front, boom, boom, boom. That it didn't go this way or that way, or put its feet down facing east or west or whatever. They wanted to know that it went boom, boom, boom. And they wanted to know that behind it flexed its hocks and its hocks moved close together. That was what was looked for. Well, now when they ask you how does the horse move, they want to know if when you put the harness on it, if its knees will hit the neck yoke and the sole of its foot will slap its belly. Does it have belly slapping action? Can it hit the neck yoke? We're talking about draft horses. They were they were produced, whatever the word might be I'm looking for. They were brought about to be draft horses. They were supposed to walk. They're supposed to go straight. Does anybody know why they're supposed to go straight? Well, all of these interfering sorts of motions that I'm talking about affect their soundness. If the horse moves boom, boom, boom straight, everything is sitting straight, and the horse will stay sounder very, very much longer. If the horse is doing this with a leg, it's straining all the joints, all the muscles, all the tendons with every step it takes. It is not going to stay sound as long. So the old regime of a horse moving straight, there was really good reason for it. There was really good reason for them wanting these broad, wide heels that gave you a big frog that acts as a cushion when they were working on hard surfaces. Your horse stayed sound very much longer. So there was lots of good reason behind what they did in the good old days when horses worked for a living. And because we're doing a totally different thing with them as far as show horses are concerned, all those old values have gone right out the window. And in the show ring, they barely ask them to walk. They rarely penalize them if they don't. There's very few judges will say, walk, and expect them to come to a flat-footed walk. Some kind of a little jiggity-jiggity dance is, oh, well, that's close enough to a walk, you know. But they are draft horses. The other thing we're doing today is they use check bits and various checking apparatuses on the harness to raise their heads up because everybody wants them to get their heads up. Well, in many cases, they check their heads up so high, the horse, and Gail was talking about horses having big eyes. Well, if they can only see the ceiling, they ain't going to see very much. And you see a lot of these big hitches are checked very, very tight, and I don't say they see nothing but the ceiling, but they can't balance themselves. If you look at a horse in the field, and whether it's a draft horse, a quarter horse, a thoroughbred horse, whatever, Gail was talking about, you know, soundness and balance and natural. They should be balanced, any of them. And in order to balance themselves, they'll carry their head in a natural position. And when you start checking them up so high with all these varying apparatuses, you know, they start to lose their balance all over the place. But that's the ways of the world, and that's where it's at today as far as the show horses are concerned. We then have what I call in this world the lawn ornaments. And they belong to people that grew up with horses, you know, worked with horses when they were kids. Grandpa had a team on the farm, or somebody had a team, or maybe all the farm work was done with horses. And they just feel things aren't right without having a team or some horses in the field. And those are the lawn ornaments. And there's quite a number of them around the countryside that just stand there. You know, they eat the grass in the summertime, they get well fed in the wintertime, they get well cared for, don't really do anything. Some of them are bred, some of them are not, some of them are geldings, it's hard to reproduce with them, but they just want to have a horse around. And there tends to be two different sorts of people in that regard. There's the people that are horse lovers, that grew up with some horses on the farm when they were kids, and they can't bear to be without a horse or two around the farm. And then there's the people that are horse haters. And when they were kids, you know, they were the ones that always had to clean the stable, or they were the ones that always had to do this, this, and this, and they didn't like it, and they hated it. And they think that these horses are just hay burners, and there's no reason or purpose for having them, and they're not having them. And, you know, there's two kinds of people, and not a lot of gray area in the middle as far as I've ever seen, you know. People are either horse crazy or they've no time for them whatsoever, and that applies to the draft horses as well. Then we go into a whole new market, and that's the pleasure end of things, the riding, the driving for pleasure. As I say, doesn't have to be horrible expensive, and you get this big clumper that is generally very, very easy to get along with, easy to saddle as long as you can reach up there, easy to get the bridle on, doesn't try to run out the barn door and take your head off, you know, it doesn't try to slam the brakes on and dump you in the first puddle. Riding, driving, it's become very, very popular at many of the major shows. So much so that at this upcoming World Clydesdale show, they're having dressage classes, barrel racing classes, English pleasure, Western pleasure. I am not joking about this. There's some things I joke about, but this is serious. They're having barrel racing with Clydes. And there will be people that will have a horse that are practicing like crazy. And I don't suppose they'll break any world records, but there'll be a lot of people who'll have a lot of fun. And I know people that are seriously training dressage horses, like Clydesdales for dressage. And there's goods to it all, because for those of us that have been in the business all our lives, it opens up a whole new market. If somebody decides that they want to participate in that part of the business, they need at least one horse. But maybe the one they do the dressage with isn't quite suitable for the barrel racing, so then they need two horses. Or they need one and their kids need one, or whatever. It's a market for some of those horses that are not 18-2, that are not going to snort and blow and, tromp all over you. So that's a whole new market that's opened up. The pleasure driving, there are going to be classes for pleasure driving as opposed to hitch classes, which to me is a very, very good thing also. It opens up to a whole new group of people and a different group of horses. I judged in Grass Valley, California in 2003. And they had one of the most amazing horse shows I've ever been at. And they told me off the start that there was, I believe it was 28 or something exhibitors for the entire show. Maybe that's not the exact number. But 18 of those exhibitors had originated in the grandstand. That when they first came to the show, they didn't own a draft horse at all. And over a period of years, 18 people had come into the industry. Some people had one horse that they showed in a pleasure class or a ridden class, or they had obstacle course classes where you drove your cart and you had to do the equivalent of the keyhole business with a draft horse and go past the mailbox and get the letters, and it was good stuff. But they had 18 people that were now exhibitors that had come from no draft horses whatsoever, some at the level of one horse to the guy that had an 8-horse hitch and could win the entire show. So all kinds of different levels. And they had some of the most unique classes I have ever seen anywhere, from, as I say, these keyhole pattern classes, pleasure driving, antique vehicle classes, some of the things that I, as the judge, was, I think I know how to judge a confirmation class or even a hitch class, but put me out to judge an antique vehicle class, that was pushing my limits quite a bit. So anyway, there's all of those things that are available to people that have draft horses. And then, of course, we have horse logging, which is making a little bit of a comeback because people have found that they're not raking the forest. They don't have to clear cut. They don't have to go in with these huge equipments, soil conservationists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, less damage. It's not ever going to take over from the big machines, but there's a place for it, and there's a few people doing that. I only ever played at it many, many years ago. Just, somebody was cutting a bit of firewood, and believe me, it's not as easy as it looks, and it's really, really hard work. But if that's your thing, there's a place for draft horses doing that. And then, of course, there's the Amish work horses, which are about the only draft horses, almost the only draft horses that are used for actual day-to-day work. I guess Western Canada, they use some teams for chore teams to feed cattle and those sorts of things in the wintertime. In this area, we think of a workhorse, we think of the Mennonite or Amish population who many, many years ago decided they were not going to go with mechanization and tractors and stayed with the horses, and there's where our workhorses are actually used. They, as we spoke about, are a very, very different size, type, and style of horse from the show horses today. They're closer to that, 16.3, 17.1, if they can find them in about that size range. Because if you're going to be putting that harness on every morning and going to do a day's work, it doesn't have to be 18.2 to get it done. The horse that's 17 hands or thereabouts will do just as good a day's work and probably stay sound a lot longer too. So they like a little stouter, more traditional type draft horse. And the price of those has greatly increased also. Used to be that market, if you were selling to that market, you'd be thinking, $1,200, maybe $1,500. And now to buy a decent draft horse to go work, something that's broke and of reasonable quality, it's going to be $4,500 to $5,000. Yes, there are cheaper horses out there, but to buy a good work team, those guys are going to have to pay probably $7,500 or more to get a good team of workhorses. So, that's that other end of the market. A little bit of history of the draft horses. The Industrial Revolution back in the late 19th century, horses built Canada and the United States. They were used for everything. They were the source of power. There were huge imports from Europe. Everybody that was going to do anything did it with horsepower because that was the only way to get it done. By about 1920, there were 26 million horses in the United States. I can't tell you what there is today because I didn't look it up, and those would be not all draft horses as we know them today, but 26 million horses. And by 1950, they're just about gone. First of all, the mechanization, they were gone from the cities. They lasted a little longer in the farms. By about the 1950s, they weren't worth much in the farms either. People were into tractors and tractor power and other ways of getting it done quicker, easier, better, or so they thought. So it went from a very flourishing trade where raising draft horses was viable, because there was a point and purpose to them, to a state where they were worth not very much. It's come back up again because of the pleasure market for showing, for pleasure, for lawn ornaments, a bit for work. Can you make any money at it? Probably not. Can you spend a lot of money on it? Absolutely. Can you have a lot of fun? Certainly. It's a very niche market. It's not like feeding cattle that you hope are going to be worth this many dollars a pound when you get them fed, or your corn's going to be worth this much a bushel. Horses are very much what somebody's prepared to pay for them, and that goes for whether it's a quarter horse, a draft horse, a thoroughbred horse. Maybe if you get one that can race and win a few million, it's probably got a more solid value. But the draft horses are, very specialized, very niche market. They're not for, I shouldn't say they're not for everybody, but it's not everybody that wants them. And the last little piece of this story is that if the draft horses could survive the advent of, it starts the way by telling us that the draft horses of today originated from the great draft horse, the great horse of Flanders, it was called, which was a common ancestor to many of our draft horse breeds today. And the story goes that they were developed for carrying the knights in armor because these guys had this heavy armor and a regular size horse wasn't going to do it. Well, of course, with the invention of gunpowder, we got done with the knights in armor and stuff, and then we had the Industrial Revolution. And the last little bit of this says, be it for whatever reason, public appeal, versatility, practicality, or economy, what was once regarded as an artifact of history has today become a tool of choice for many. The breed registries in this country confirm that it is growing. Any genome that has survived first gunpowder and then industrialization can survive almost anything. And survive is what the draft industry has done. So there's a lot of them around, a lot of people having fun with them. Anybody got any questions or arguments, or let's go right to it? One at a time. Don't all jump at once.
Yeah, sorry. I have a few questions. Sorry, Larry. I know we all show because we make lots of money, right?
Yeah.
Do you win much when you get up to that level? In the big, like, I mean, if you go to the Royal, is it worth it?
They won't be, in the big picture of things, I very, very much doubt that they're covering their expenses. If they win some of the big championship shows, they might be getting a check for maybe $10,000. I believe the championship 6-horse hitch at the Royal, the total purse, I believe, was $25,000, and I believe the first place got $10,000 this past year. But it probably cost them at least that much to go to the Royal. They came from Iowa, the winning outfit. They've been on the road all year. Yeah, they've done a huge amount of winning. But going to the Royal and having people there for a week, roughly speaking, is hugely expensive. So you take trucks and fuel and permits and hired help and entries, stalls, all these things. If they broke even, they would be doing well. They're not doing it for the prize money, is the answer to the question.
Okay, sorry, I have a few questions. We're obviously all familiar with the Budweiser Clydes.
Absolutely.
But how many of those get rejected a year on their breeding program, do you know?
How many get rejected from the Budweiser breeding program?
Right, they breed them for the hitch, but
Actually, Budweiser over the years probably have bought a far, far greater number of the horses they use than what they've ever raised. And that's not intended to be any slight on their breeding program, but it's very, very hard to raise Clydesdales that are all going to be over 18 hands, are going to be bright red bays with no white splashes, no white hairs, 4 white legs cut off just above the knees and hocks, perfect white stripes, not bald faces or blue eyes or no black legs, no mixed legs. There's a lot of criterion to this. And, if say they have 50 mares on a breeding farm, first off, they're not going to get 50 foals in any given year. Clydesdales are hard to raise. So if they had 40 foals out of 50 mares, live foals out of 50 mares, they're probably doing fairly well. Approximately 50% of those are going to be female, so that's out, because they only use geldings in their hitches. So you're down to 20 right off the start, and of that 20, how many of them are going to grow to be over 18 hands? How many of them have a little bit of color in a leg or a white slab on a body or all sorts of little criterion? Doesn't make them a bad horse. They've also all got to live till they're better than 3 years old, to go ahead and be trained to be a Budweiser horse. And then there's some that are just plain not suited to it. I ain't never going to run a marathon, and there's some horses that are never going to be Budweiser horses. That's what it comes down to. So they do actually, they buy, always have, and probably will continue to buy quite a number of their hitch horses. They try to raise them. They also sell quite a lot of very good horses out to the general public that don't quite fit their program, but it doesn't make them lesser horses.
Thank you. I have one more question. Sorry, Laurie.
Sure. Go for it.
We've watched Western pleasure really get dumbed down and creating animals that are, and you talk about how the knee action seems to be a big thing now. Do you think there's going to come a point when they say, you know what, enough's enough, we're going to revert back to older style, or do you think we'll just get to the part where we're basically looking at Dutch harness horses in an 8-hitch?
I'm not sure the answer to that. I don't see the clock turning backwards. It doesn't in very many things. There's just been more and more emphasis on this extreme action, different style of horse. Because that's what is rewarded in the show ring. Some of these top-end outfits are not going to go, oh, well, I'm going to get rid of this top-winning outfit, and I'm going to go back to a different style of horse, and I'm going to be 15th instead of 1st. Not going to happen. And the horses have evolved. They've been selectively bred to produce these bigger, taller, lighter boned, higher-headed more action. And the action is enhanced by the shoeing and all the stuff, so I don't think it'll change back, certainly not in my lifetime.
Question back here.
Hello, thank you, first of all, for a wonderful presentation, but I have 2 Irish draft, and sometimes I think, oh, I'd like to try a pleasure driving local shows, and I've been told that you can only do it with the 3, like the Belgian or the Clyde or the Percheron, that the Irish draft wouldn't be able to go in for a draft pleasure. Is that true?
It would very much depend on the show. You probably would be looking at being involved with some of the carriage driving people, as opposed to at most of the local fairs, it is draft horse, as in Belgian Percher and Clydesdale. There are very few shires in this part of the country. So it's mostly Belgians, Perchers, and Clydesdales. And a lot of the fair books specify that. And some places it's, classes for each breed, and some places it's combined. But where your Irish draft horses could be shown would be in the carriage driving world, where they have their own shows, trail riding and arena driving, cones, pylons, courses. And there are a few fairs, like Paisley Fair is one that has, a ladies' pleasure class driven, and you can show anything from a miniature to a draft horse and anything in between, a standardbred, a hackney. They have a few classes that allow anybody to show. But for the most part, you're probably looking at the carriage world.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, got a bunch. Okay, I'm coming your way. We'll start here, and then we're going to Nancy and then Carolyn.
Excellent speech, Marion. Nothing was ever mentioned about feeding. What's your thoughts on feeding haylage or baggage to horses?
I've never ever done it, never had to. I thought Bob was going to ask me if I do feed them, and yes, I do. I know different people that are feeding this wrapped haylage, bailage, wrapped feed. Back when it was first kind of introduced, there were some bad issues, and I believe it was botulism. I've never had to feed it. I've been very, very lucky. I buy my hay, and I've been very, very lucky that I have good suppliers, and I get good hay, and if I use the great big square bales. If I open a bale and it's not satisfactory, I just put it aside and open another one, and I tell them, and they take it away and feed it to somebody's cows or whatever. So I'm very, very lucky. I have a good supply. I know a number of people that are feeding that wrapped feed, and I haven't heard of any problems recently. It may well be one of these things that the different chemical treatments they put on it now to preserve it is better. There's maybe less bacteria in it. I don't know the answers to those things, but I know it's a much more common feed than it was. Let's put it that way. And I haven't heard of any problems with it recently. That's about as best I can tell you on that.
You expressed concern about the bone structure of the horses getting smaller boned. Doesn't that, like if you're judging a line class and you have some horses in there that are smaller boned and they're winning, doesn't that encourage people to say, oh, well, this is what they're looking for now, so that's what we're going to breed for? And it goes right back to the line classes, actually, what the judges are placing, doesn't it?
You're very correct in many ways, because over quite a number of years, the more modern type, the lighter bone, the high stepping action, longer necks, the more modern type has been highly rewarded in the show ring, most places. But you have to remember also that when it comes to draft horses, there is no breed standard. There's no guidelines. So my opinion, your opinion, your opinion, your opinion back there could all be completely different, and there's nobody says I'm right and you're wrong. If I'm in the ring judging, I want it to look like a draft horse. Yes, if I can have it with a beautiful long neck, as well as bone and foot. I'm a big believer, no foot, no horse. Start at the bottom, work up. If you don't have a set of legs, a set of feet, and a set of legs, you haven't got anything to carry this body anyway. Your soundness comes from your feet and your legs. Gail was talking about the fact that you should know your horse's legs by appearance and by feel, and you should be able to recognize it that way. A draft horse is no different. Any show horse, no matter the breed, if you don't have legs, if you don't have sound feet, it's not going to do anything for you. It's not going to cross country, it's not going to jump, it's not going to trail raid, it's not going to barrel race, it's not going to drag a wagon around the arena if you don't have sound legs and feet. So the judging of them, exactly what you said is correct. They have been rewarding that, therefore the breeders have been going in that direction. But if you go back to the Clydesdale business, and the Royal Winter Fair is probably the more traditional show in all of North America, and it'll always be a more traditional type Clydesdale that wins there. Don't ask me why. I can't explain to you why it works that way, but it always seems to happen that way. A more traditional, Clydier, more of the type they still have in Scotland. A very, very well-known Percheron breeder said to me a number of years ago, I had recently been to Scotland and we were talking on the phone. He said, "Oh, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, it's like two different worlds." I said, "We've got our North American horses and we've got our Scottish horses, and they're all Clydesdales, but they're like two different animals now." And I said, "Really, I think to get the right horse, we need to combine them. Somewhere in the middle would be about perfect." And he said, I said, "You Clydesdale people are so lucky," because he said, "You've got a foundation in Scotland to go back to bring your breed back." And he said, the Percheron people, he said, although there's Percherons in France, he said, they're too far removed. He said, "We can't go back there." And he said, "Our Percherons have gotten so light and so fine," he said, "and we've got no foundation to go back to." So that was his opinion, and that's probably 15 years ago.
Just about wiped out on my papers, sorry. To the Irish lady, back the Irish draft, I can put you in touch with the OCDA, which is the Ontario Carriage Driving Association, as well as Tri-County Carriage. I'm involved in both. And so the second part, if you're interested, and they definitely would be interested, they take all different breeds of driving horses, and it's a great group. It's both great. It's funny because you're hitting home with your breed. I'm very involved with the miniature horse, and this is exactly what is happening in our breed. Our breed has been, same thing with they were very family-oriented horses, lots of bone, lots of body, and again, the breed is being rewarded in the show ring for being lighter, hotter. They're mixing Hackney into our minis, and unfortunately, I guess the only thing I can say is that it's really what I keep saying to people that are worried about the breed, as well as your breed, is it's really form to function. You've got to decide what you want to do. I carriage drive and I do combined driving with my minis. I have to have bone. I have to have good body. I have to have good feet. So I can't go with the lot lighter. I still have to have the pretty. But so I just try to really get to know the market, and I just say to people that are looking to get into our breed, figure out what you want to do. So, like if you want to show, then obviously you've got to look at that look, and then if you want to do driving or riding or what have you. So I guess that's really, but your breed sounds very versatile because you've got so many different elements, very
There are
similar
lots
to
of things you
ours.
can do with them. It's only controlled by someone's imagination. There are very, very few things that you can't do with a draft horse of some sort if that's what you want to do.